Margaret and myself, we're in business. Flamborough Downs, harness racetrack, operated well, and we were supported coincidentally by people in our Linz area. Those of you who may be familiar with Linz, that's the Niagara Peninsula, goes over to Kitchener, Waterloo, Brantford, down to Lake Erie. And when we disposed, or had the opportunity, and of course, age wasn't on our side, that perpetrated the reason to sell the business. There was a great deal of money paid to us, and when you get something like that going, Margaret and I discussed and literally researched what's the best way of sharing our good fortune, and it was an easy decision. It started with our employees to begin with. We think we were reasonable with them to begin with, and then we researched healthcare and thought that's the best way of giving back, especially in our own area, to the people who supported us. I have to tell you that millions, literally, of people came to our business over the years, lost their money betting the horses, lost their money in the slot machines. We got a little piece of it. And it was an easy decision to give back. I also want to touch on what Kevin said about future, if you will, philanthropy, tough word, philanthropy planning. I can tell you that Margaret and I, and I'm proud of this, our total thrust is healthcare and the future of healthcare, and we are and have been forward planning with reference to our finances, established a foundation, and are working towards and will leave everything to healthcare in the hands of our foundation people. And the reason we're really doing that is because of the good feeling that we get from doing it. Kevin touched on it. I just want to give you a little bit of an insight. The Juravinski Hospital and Cancer Center on Concession Street. I shudder to even walk into the lobby because inevitably somebody comes over who's had their chemo, wearing a bandana, maybe in a wheelchair. They want to have a word, and I will break up because you have a hug, they say thank you, and I'll tell you, they don't have to wash the floors at the Juravinski Hospital and Cancer Center because we always cry. Thank you.
Those of you who may not know, Charlie and Margaret to this point have contributed over $80 million to healthcare in Hamilton, and really their legacy will live long after them. But I think this legacy of philanthropy, as I said, this is something that drives all of us in a very different way. We all are supportive of the system we live and the society we live, and as I said, our system requires that, and it's part of the investment we make in our future of our society. With that, I would like to invite all of you to enjoy lunch next door, and we'll get back together at 1:30 for the rest of this afternoon. And we have some incredible, not only speakers, but performers this afternoon, so it's going to be fun. And just so you're aware, the door prizes, the iPad Mini and the Tiger Cat signed jersey will be available for draw at the end of today, and those who are here will win it. So, so hopefully you can stay till the end and be one of the winners of the prizes. But enjoy the lunch next door. Thank you. I know there are some others bringing, but so just make sure your robots is set up for tomorrow. We're going to see our next presenter is Antoine Cantin, who is the world record holder for Rubik cubes one-handed. I don't think he needs a lot of introduction. You'll see his amazing gift, and he'll talk a little bit about pushing the limits of the Rubik cube and what he's been able to achieve and what he wants to do, and really about how his knowledge of mathematics has helped him in some of this. We'll first see a short video about him, and then Anton will come and talk to us. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll need the table. Just a second, I'm going to place a few cubes so I can show you. So I press what button? To the right? I have to say next slide? Well, it's because the text goes on as I click. Yeah. Not yet. So I'm all right? I need a clicker. I need a clicker. Yeah. So I press left to go. Okay, so sorry about the wait. Before my presentation, I'd just like to say that I'm really honored to be here at this conference. And in fact, when I first got invited, it was also a really big surprise that I was invited here. When I first got invited, I thought of myself kind of like, I'm just a kid who plays with toys all day. And that didn't seem to really fit into this conference. But then again, what I do, if the clicker works, which doesn't seem to. Right button? It doesn't work. Okay. Oh. Okay, so what I do isn't really just playing with toys. What I do is speed cubing, or also called speed solving. And speed solving is more than just playing with toys. It's trying to solve Rubik's Cubes as fast as possible. It's participating in Rubik's Cube speed solving competitions. So not only playing with toys, but trying to play with toys better and faster than other people. It's also trying to push the limits of what's humanly possible to solve Rubik's Cubes. So not just playing with toys, but trying to play with toys as well as it's possible. So it's not just playing with toys, it's much more than that. And also what we do, the toy we play with is not just any toy. A Rubik's Cube is a puzzle. In fact, it's a very difficult puzzle. I don't know how many of you have already tried to solve a Rubik's Cube, but I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, were quite unsuccessful to solve it. Now, what makes the Rubik's Cube so difficult? Well, first of all, there are over 43 quintillion different ways to scramble it. Now, that's a lot of different ways to scramble it, and that's a lot of different patterns they have to be able to solve in order to solve it. Now, that's not the only reason why it's so difficult. Another big reason for its difficulty is that a cube is divided into different pieces, and every piece has many different stickers on it. And when you do a turn, you turn many pieces. So there's really a lot of stickers moving when you do a turn. That makes it very difficult to solve new pieces without accidentally scrambling others that you've already tried to solve. That makes it very unlike many other jigsaw puzzles, for example, where you can just move one piece as you wish. This one, you move many pieces at a time. Now, I wasn't always speed solving. In fact, I started about 5 years ago in 2009 at the request, or more the insistence, of my older brother. So he had a cube, he was into it, and he really wanted me to learn how to solve it. I was kind of reluctant, but in the end, I started solving it. It looks kind of boring, but whatever. Anyhow, after about a year, I just did it really casually, and it would take me about 1.5 minutes to solve it. But then, in September 2010, about a year later, my brother picked it up again, and, well, he was my older brother, and I wanted to do it faster than him. That's pretty much what siblings try to do, try to beat your brother. So I started really practicing in order to try to beat him. By November, I was confident I could beat him and decided to enter my first competition. Over there, the average of my solves was of 32.14 seconds. I thought I could beat him there, but unfortunately, my brother beat me by about 1 second. So it wasn't very encouraging, but I decided that I'd just continue practicing more and more so that I could beat him. And in fact, at the next competition, I was able to beat him. I beat him by about 5 seconds, where my average was about 20 seconds, and his was about 25. Now, from then on, I progressed very fast. And in order to progress, I just started competing more and more often in Rubik's Cube solving competitions. I practiced a lot and improved pretty quickly. However, when you just do something in repetition and you do it very many times, you're going to improve a lot. But after a certain point, you're going to reach a kind of plateau where just solving it, doing it repetitively, you won't really improve very much. So to continue improving from that point, I had to use many different resources. So I used speed solving forums, which is a very nice online resource. I learned from a lot of tutorials on YouTube. I talked to many different friends who also did the cube, and I had to criticize myself, find the weakest points in my solves. And that's pretty much like anything. You can't just practice it very many times, because after a certain point, you won't improve. You have to really find other different ways in order to improve and innovate like that. Now, from that point, I just continued doing that and continued competing, and that's pretty much how I got to the speed where I am today. After that point, I branched out into other different ways of solving the cube, and pretty much just restarted the same thing again in order to get fast at it. So I branched out into other different events, like one-handed solving, and that became one of my favorite ways of solving the cube, and I just continued practicing it and got where I am today. Now, here I've got a graph which I've found pretty neat about my improvement. So you can see that it goes down pretty quickly. The top line is the average of all the solves I did in every competition, and the bottom line is the fastest solve. You can also note that there's a green dotted line. That is the 10-second mark. And note that for a great deal of competitions, my average there was just over 10 seconds. And that really goes to show how much a psychological barrier can stop you from improving and keep you from showing your full potential. And then at some point, I was able to overcome that barrier, and I went down under 10 seconds by quite a margin. Now I've got a similar graph for one-handed solving, which was my favorite event for a long time. Note also, the first time that it goes up at the 15.09, that was at the World Championships. So I was really nervous, and that goes to show once again how much your psychological can really stop you from doing your full potential. Now I'm going to talk a little about the skills required to speed solve Rubik's Cubes and to be good at it, because a lot of people right now, I'm sure they don't think that they're able to do it because they don't think they have the skills required. So in order to do this, you really have to have a good memory. There's the manual memory, because you have to remember different sequences of moves to solve certain patterns on the cube. And then there's also the visual memory, because you have to know what the cube looks like when you do those sequences of moves. There's also the memory for when you want to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, which I'm going to talk about a little later in the presentation. Now, there's also very much quick thinking, because when you solve the cube as fast as possible, you turn quickly, so you have to really react very fast to what you see. Next is the looking ahead. Once again, you turn very fast, and in order to achieve fast times, your solves have to be really seamless. You want to be able to not stop at all when you're turning. So you have to be able to look how the pieces of the cube are moving so that you can just continuously turn, and you have to really think of what you're doing next, not what you're currently doing. Oops. There's also spatial recognition, because a cube is three-dimensional. So that's a lot like 3D thinking. You have to think what the pieces look like, what the stickers look like on all the different faces, so that you can really track them and figure out how they move so you know what to do next. That goes a lot with the look ahead. There's the dexterity, of course, because as you saw in the video, you have to turn very fast in order to solve it. There's critical thinking, as I mentioned earlier, that you really have to use in order to improve yourself. Find the weakest points of your solve so you can improve upon them. And then there's, of course, the perseverance. When you want to get good at anything, when you want to achieve certain objectives, it always seems very difficult at the beginning. It seems like you have to do a lot of work. But really what you have to do is you have to separate it into smaller goals or smaller objectives, which are easier to obtain. And that way you can just continue persevering through it without being discouraged too much. Now, there are different events in speed cubing. So just like a lot of other sports, there are different events. Like, for example, in running, there's the 100 meters, 200 meters, 500 meters, and marathon, and many different events like that, just like in speed cubing. So there's, of course, the normal cubic puzzles, going from the 2-layered puzzles all the way up to 7 layers. So this one can be considered like a little sprint, and this one is more like a marathon. There's also different puzzles, different shaped puzzles, like the Pyraminx, which is pyramid-shaped. There's the Megaminx, which is, sorry about that. So there's a lot of different shapes. Sorry. Okay, so there's also the Scube, which is a cube which turns diagonally. There's the Rubik's Clock, which is another puzzle. There's the square one. And all those different puzzles are slightly different ways that you have to think about what you're doing, but they're all quite similar because they have a very similar goal to get all this right color on the right side. Now, there's also different ways of solving the standard Rubik's Cube, like this one. Now, first I'm going to talk a little about the regular solving, or solving it with two hands. So here I've got a mixed up Rubik's Cube in front of me, and I'm going to solve it as fast as I can to show you a little what it looks like. So here it's solved. And in order to be able to solve a Rubik's Cube fast like that, there are a few things that you have to take into account. First of all, there's the turning of the cube. Now, what we do, what speed solvers, how to turn the cube, we don't use our entire wrist to try to turn the cube like that. What we do is that we use our fingers to flick at it, and once we do that, we can turn the cube extremely fast. In fact, we can turn it much faster than we can actually see what's happening. So we have to find a good balance in between turning fast and being able to see what's happening. So as you progress, you're able to turn faster and faster because you can see how the pieces move better, and you have more of a spatial recognition. Next, there's also that we want our solves to take as few moves as possible to help decrease the time. But if we try to think too much about reducing the moves, we're going to have to stop and think too much, and that is something we want to avoid. So there's a lot of things that we have to find a good balance in between in order to solve a Rubik's Cube quickly. And next I have a video which demonstrates the method that we use when we solve the cube. So video, please. Okay, so basically what we do when we solve a cube is that we first solve a cross. And then we're going to try to put pieces together in order to fill in between those cross pieces. And then what we're going to do is we're going to continue doing that until we're done the first two layers. And then we have to learn sequences of moves to get the right color on top, and then more sequences of moves to swap away all the rest of the pieces. Now that kind of sounds pretty complicated, especially that it was turning pretty fast at certain times. But once you get the hang of it, it's a very good method for solving it rapidly because you don't have to think very much, and it kind of comes pretty automatically because there's a lot of sequences of moves that you learn, and you don't have to think too much when you're doing it, which is what you want. So next is a video of what a fast Rubik's Cube solve could look like, or should look like. So a video. Okay. So as you can see, that was I was turning pretty fast, and I didn't stop very much, so it was a pretty seamless solve, and that's how fast solves should look like. Just for comparison, the world record right now is 5.55 seconds, so it's about 1.5 seconds slower than the world record, but it's still very fast. Next, I'm going to talk a little about one-handed solving. And one-handed solving is my specialty. As you might have seen from the video, I have the world record for it. So I've got a cube over here, and I'm going to show you what a one-handed solve, fast one-handed solve can look like. Unfortunately, I'm not warmed up very much right now, so it's not amazing. Okay. So the first thing you have to take into account when one-handed solving is how to turn it, because it doesn't seem very obvious. Now what we do in order to turn the cube, as you might be able to see from the picture, is we use our index finger and our pinky finger to turn the two faces that are the closest to them. And that works pretty well, but we don't turn all that fast. So what that means is that we have a little more time to think. And when we have more time to think, that means that we have more time to be able to make our solves more move efficient, so we can take less moves. So we turn less fast, we kind of make a little compromise, and it takes less moves. So that makes it a little faster, I guess. Another thing is that you have to adapt your solving style to the two-finger turning. Now, basically what that means is that we use our pinky and our index finger to turn. So those two faces that are closest are going to be the easiest and the fastest to turn. So we're going to try to use those two moves as much as possible in order to get fast solves. Next, I've got a video of what a fast one-handed solve could look like. Now you're going to see in that video, I'm going to really use those two faces that are the closest to those fingers. Unfortunately, it's not appearing on the screen right now. Hopefully we can fix that. Yeah, okay. So yeah, really see that I'm using those two fingers, and they're really fast moves that I'm using in the solve so that I can get it as fast as possible. Now that was 9.12 seconds. The world record right now is 9.03 seconds, so it's quite close to that. Now I'm going to talk about, I'm going to need to see the presentation. Okay, now I'm going to talk about solving the Rubik's Cube with your feet. Now, I don't have very much time, and you probably won't see it very well anyways, so I won't do a demonstration for feet solving right now, but if you guys really want, I could do that during the questions afterwards. So the first thing you have to take into account, once again, is how to turn a cube with your feet. Now, what we've decided, what we've done to overcome that challenge, is that we put the cube on the floor, and then we use one foot to kind of pin it down, and then the other foot to kind of stomp at it in order to try to turn it like that. It sounds really awkward, but it actually works quite well. Now, once again, we turn even slower. We turn much slower than solving it one-handed, so that means that it can be much more move efficient, and we can save time like that. However, probably the biggest drawback, the biggest challenge in feat solving is the limited visibility. So as you can see in this image, we really don't see very much of the cube when we're turning it. Unlike regular solving, the angle is very different. The cube is further away. We've got our feet in the way, so we don't see what's happening. So we have to think a lot more. We have to figure out what's on the other side of the cube using our spatial recognition and our look ahead to try to figure out what we're doing without actually seeing what we're doing. So we kind of sometimes have to do educated guesses in order to solve it without pausing too much. Now I've got a video once again of what a fast solve with your feet could look like. Also note that this is not from the angle that, from the solver's point of view, it's in front of the person that's solving it, well, in front of me, and that's so you see better. So in reality, me, when I'm solving it, I see much less of the cube than you. Okay, so that was 31 seconds. The world record right now is 27. So kind of close once again. Now, I'm going to see the next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little about blindfolded solving. Now, blindfolded solving is very different from regular solving, very different from one-handed or feet solving, because, well, you don't see the cube. So, first of all, we even use a very different method in order to solve it when we solve it blindfolded. That's because the memorizing would be very difficult if we use our regular method. If we use our regular method, we'd have to memorize how the stickers move for every turn so that we know what turns we have to do after that turn, if that makes sense. So we'd have to memorize about 20 stickers, how they move for every turn, and there's about 60 turns on average when you do a regular solve. So that would be a lot of stuff you'd have to memorize. So instead, what we do is that we solve the cube one piece at a time in order so that we just have to track one sticker at a time, and it's much easier like that. To memorize the cube, we use what we call letter pair memorization. Basically what that means is that we assign one letter to every piece on the cube, and then when we have to solve that piece, we're going to memorize that letter. And then for the next piece we solve, we're going to memorize that letter as well and put those letters together and either make a word and then create a story with those words, or just make sounds and then remember those sounds. Now that's a little abstract, so in order so that you understand a little better, I'm going to show you an example. So here I've got a scramble formula telling me how to scramble the cube for this example. Okay. So now the first piece I have on the cube that I have to scramble, that I'd have to solve, is the piece that I've assigned the W letter to. Now the next piece is an X, or the X piece. So I'm going to make a word. I'm going to think of wax. And then the next one is C, and then T. So I'm going to think of that I'm waxing a cat. And the next one would be K, and then M. So I'll memorize that I'm waxing a cat with a kimono. Now that sounds pretty ridiculous and pretty weird, but the more bizarre that your memorization is, the better you'll remember it. Because if it's something that's just a normal thing, you won't remember it as well. Now I also have to memorize the other type of piece, and for the other type of piece, I'm going to memorize it using sounds. So the first letter here is Q and then E. So for that, I'm going to memorize qui, and then I, R, qui, ir, S, and then O, qui, ir, so, and then J and A. So qui, ir, soja. So all I have to memorize so that I can do this cube blindfolded is that I'm waxing a cat with a kimono, and then qui, ir, soja. So now it sounds kind of far-fetched, because that has nothing to do with what a cube looks like, or it seems. But in order to really prove it to you, I'm going to solve it behind my back. So I'm going to first do the algorithm to solve the W piece. And then the X piece, because of course I'm waxing a cat with a kimono. So now I'm going to do C, and then T, and then kimono, so K and then M. Okay, now I'm going to go along for the other type of piece where I memorize the qui, ir, soja. So I'm going to, the first piece is Q, so I'm going to go and do the algorithm to solve the Q piece. And then the E, qui, I, R, and then soja, so S, O, J, and then A. Now hopefully it's solved, it should be, and it is. Now I'm going to skip the next video. It's a video of me solving it blindfolded, but I just did it in front of you right now, so I don't think it's necessary. Okay, so now in those different events, I've achieved a great deal of things, as you might have seen from the video. So my biggest achievement by far was the world record for solving a Rubik's Cube one-handed. That was really a thrill to me because solving it one-handed was my favorite way of solving it for a long time, and I really aspired to get that, and when I got it, it was really amazing. And I was also the 11-time Canadian and North American record holder for one-handed. That was before I got the world record, so I beat the Canadian and North American records 11 times before getting the world record. And I'm also a 2-time Canadian record holder for solving a Rubik's Cube regularly. The North American record for the Scube puzzle. I have 5 Canadian records in Pyraminx and Rubik's Clock, which are also other puzzles. 5 Canadian records in Magic and Master Magic, which are puzzles which have since been retired from the governing body of the Rubik's Cubes. Now, because of those achievements, and especially the world record, I've passed a lot in the media. And so my school, they decided to make a compilation of some of the TV interviews I went in. So I like that video, so I decided that I'd show it to you today. Also note that it's a French school, so the first and last one are in French.
Une marque mondiale. Il est le recordman mondial désormais des compétitions de cube Rubik. Et lui, il le fait à une main et il le fait dans un temps record. Regardez bien ce que ça
kids have a
donne.
Rubik's Cube and a few grown-ups as well. Not very many people would manage to solve it though, but at 15 years old, not only can Antoine Canton solve one, he can do it quicker
I want
than
to introduce
anyone
you
on the
because I have the
planet.
pleasure of introducing you now to Antoine Campan. He's 15 years old. He's from Rockland, which is just outside of Ottawa. And this weekend in Toronto, he set a world record. He solved a Rubik's Cube using one hand in an average of just over 12 seconds. Okay,
We're going to get for Leanne and I to get schooled on a simple game that has been mastered by Antoine Cantin, and he's the Rubik's Cube single-handed world record holder now, right?
Yes, I am.
Did you just do it while I was saying that?
I did.
Yes, he did.
You're
On
blowing my
termine ce
mind.
journal avec un nouveau record du monde de Rubik's Cube. Nous le devons à ce franco-canadien, Antoine Quentin, 15 ans. Il a résolu le casse-tête en à peine plus de 10 secondes, le tout à une seule main. Le petit prodige s'entraîne quand même depuis 5 ans.
The multicolored tiles have an astonishing 43 quintillion, yes, that is a real number, different configurations. But there's only one solution, and only one person in the world who can solve it single-handedly in just 10 seconds.
Today, 15-year-old
CTV's
Antoine
Lori.
Quentin of Rockland holds the world record for solving a Rubik's Cube, and he did
It's
it
hard enough to do
one-handed.
Rubik's Cube, harder to solve it quickly.
How about being able to solve it in a matter of seconds with just one hand? An area teenager has set a new world record for doing just that.
Il s'appelle Antoine Quentin, il a 15 ans et c'est le nouveau détenteur du record du monde pour résoudre le cube Rubik à une seule main, des images absolument renversantes. Et aujourd'hui, mon collègue Denis Babin est allé rencontrer le champion à son école.
Okay, so now for the conclusion, I'm going to talk about is speed cubing, is what I do, is it really worth something? Does it actually give anything to me? So the first point I'm going to talk about is the prize money, or kind of the financial situation. Now, unfortunately, unlike a lot of different sports or events, there isn't really any prize money in Rubik's Cube solving. So there are only about 2 or 3 competitions every year which give prize money, and that prize money is only about $200, let's say, for the winner of every event. So that's enough to encourage you to practice that, but it isn't even really enough to pay for your travel to those competitions. Also, there aren't any sponsors in this to help you go to competitions. Personally, I'd love to have a sponsor so that I could go all kinds of competitions around the world, but unfortunately, that just isn't possible right now in speed cubing. So really, I don't do this for for any financial reasons. I do this for many different reasons. I do it to break records, of course, but also in large part because of the cubing community. Because there isn't any prize money, it's really a friendly competition. And so everybody that goes to competitions, they're all your friends, you know them very well, and that's what makes it so fun to go to competitions, to meet your friends and just talk about stuff related to cubing. And we cooperate a lot about how to improve ourselves. So there's competitiveness, but there's also working together, which is really what drives me and a lot of other Rubik's Cube solvers to improve. Now, I've also acquired a great deal of skills, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And those skills are skills that they can be kind of specialized, but they're also quite basic skills that can help you in a lot of different other aspects of life. Now, finally, there's also a lot of visibility and experiences. Now, ever since I've been a world-class speed cuber, ever since I got the world record, I've been to many different places. I've traveled to many different competitions. I've had a great deal of amazing experiences, going in the media, as you've seen, and of course, coming to conferences, coming to this conference, and it's really an amazing experience for me. Now, just to conclude, I've only been able to get where I am today and to achieve what I have achieved because I was able to innovate, just like this conference is all about. I was able to find new, better ways of overcoming the challenges to push the limits of the Rubik's Cube. Thank you. Questions or requests for me to solve something? Yes? Really? Okay, well, I just finished 10th grade. I'm going to 11th grade next year. My average was 95. No kidding. Yes? Ever since about 5th grade, I was in the Enrich programs. But for cubing in specific, my dad has been really helpful in helping me create a Rubik's Cube club at school. And we've really done a lot of Rubik's Cube stuff there, and we've spend a lot of time to organize competitions and to really kind of nurture the passion and to help encourage other people that like solving Rubik's Cubes to get into that. And we've taught a lot of people how to solve it and kind of brought them into the community for speed solving. Yeah, there's, I would say, a lot of connection between game and learning. Like, for example, I'll take the Rubik's Cube solving, for example, again. It can be considered a lot of a game because you try to solve it, and it's like a puzzle. It could be considered a game as well. But it's a game, and it helps you really, it encourages you to continue practicing and learning a lot of new things from it. So games can be used a lot of it as an incentive for learning.
What goes through your head? Does anything go through your head, or is it all automatic, or what are you saying to yourself as you actually?
Okay. Well, I've solved the Rubik's Cube so many times that it is automatic at a certain point, but also I'm constantly learning new things, new ways of solving certain situations a little better. So when I'm solving a cube, I also have to think a lot, think of if I'm going through a situation that I've recently learned that I could improve upon. And I'm always trying to think critically about what I'm doing and finding ways to improve it as I'm doing it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
A lot more awards, but I hope this is something that you remember. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Fantastic. I feel really sorry for Ian because he has to follow this, and I did not plan it, Ian. It's Deborah, so blame it on Deborah. But our next speaker is Ian Hannon, who is the Vice President and General Manager of Hologic Specialty Imaging Products Division. Ian has sort of steered through a young fledgling company, Sentinel, which is a Canadian and was purchased by Hologic, and has been certainly helping lead the imaging division of this multinational company, which basically has 60% of the breast imaging market. And his experience in the helm of this has allowed him to talk about building a successful, innovative business based on his personal experiences. Ian, we're delighted you could be here with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anvari. Thank you, everybody. And it is a pleasure to be here, and I do feel honored. We've been associated with some work that Dr. Anvari is doing, and it is also very visionary and innovative, obviously, and I think setting new directions in medicine that's very exciting. I wanted to spend some time today way less interesting than that, but just talking a little bit about maybe shifting gears a little bit to what it's like to actually be on the inside. So we talk about innovation, we talk about growing companies, and getting a sense of what it's like to actually operate in that environment. I have some work colleagues here that can validate some of the stories that I'm about to tell. But that experience in itself is also truly what's required to take innovation not just from technology, but through to full realization of the potential of that technology, really make it happen. So I'm going to see if I can work the clicker. Which button am I pressing, Antoine? Right button? Okay. So a little bit about us. I'm going to introduce a little bit about Sentinel. Specifically, Sentinel is what I'm going to talk about today because it was the growth company that I was a part of initially. This is why we exist. Breast cancer will affect 1 in 8 women. It's the second most common cause of cancer-related deaths in women, and early detection is obviously vital to the successful treatment of breast cancer. I think we all know this story well, but these statistics are still staggering and an important reason for why we exist. So why breast MRI? Just a quick introduction. I won't take you through all the detail of MRI, but MRI, unlike X-ray based technologies like mammography, uses magnetic resonance imaging technology to build an image. And if you want any deep dives, you want to see the back table over there with our radio frequency engineers. But, you know, MRI provides, if you want to think about the difference that MRI makes in mammography, think about a chest x-ray versus the kind of metabolic images that you may have seen coming from an MRI if somebody has a neurological problem. It's that kind of difference. The quality of the information, the quality of the images is staggering. So we increase the sensitivity and the specificity. So we find more cancer, and more often it is cancer when we find it. And breast cancer can affect women of any age, obviously. And so you want to minimize non-ionizing radiation. So there's a good business case for why MRI. The challenge for MRI is cost. We all know what wait lists look like in MRI facilities, and that is the conundrum that faces us as a business and society, right? What is the cost of care that we can afford? Increasingly, across all nations, healthcare economics are driving policy and are such an important part of what we do that it also impacts our fairly niche business in breast MRI. Why we grew was really driven by, in 2007, the ACS made a recommendation that in the US, and a lot of our market grew in the US, I won't apologize for it, it's just a reality. In 2007, the ACS recommended that all women at high risk get an annual screen under MRI. So in addition to mammography, you get an MRI. The reason for that is that if you're BRCA1, BRCA2, you're at a higher risk. If you have a family history or other risk factors, you're at much higher risk for breast cancer. You should have not only mammography, but you should have this much more advanced imaging modality, despite the fact it's more expensive. That recommendation, combined with reimbursement, because follow the money, it always drives the market, reimbursement for physicians, and us with the best technology on the street is really what drove the Hologic or the Sentinel growth story for MRI. This is the kind of growth we're talking about. So we were a niche application in a specific market, but if you take a look at the graph, you can see it's a hockey stick, right? I mean, the procedures grew from nothing in 1998 to almost 2 million procedures in the US in 2013. That's over a 20% compound annual growth rate and is a really significant and would be an attractive market. We are the fastest growing procedure on MRI. So what I'm going to talk about for the remainder of the talk is what it's like to live going through that curve and the kind of what you actually feel inside the company when you go through that curve. So a little bit about our history. We spun out of Sunnybrook's Research Center, Dr. Don Pluis's lab. Great technology, really innovative, world-leading. I still get comments today about the kind of quality that we had in that initial research and the way it really drove an amazing business. We were founded in 2004. We evolved from that first development. We were acquired by Hologic in 2010. So we went from, I joined the company in 2008. For those of you that are following money, let me just talk about revenue for a minute. So we went from 300,000 in revenue in 2008 to 4 million to 8 million to 16 million to acquired, which is a huge growth curve, going from an engineering team to full production and everything else that we needed to do. And that's really, the basis of the stories I want to tell in just a minute. We partner with GE, Siemens, Toshiba. We supply products to their MRIs. We are effectively an accessory to their MRI. We are in 6 of the 8 top cancer centers in the US market. We have 7 new coil products released in the past 2 years, so rapid product release in the last 2 years. Double-digit growth rates, poised for continued growth. We're in the breast and prostate imaging space. I'm going to make some comments around market size. Just keep that in mind. We are in small, very niche applications. And we, as a result of some changes, we are currently seeking buyers for our business. So I'm giving you the story from the perspective of somebody that joined at first revenue, came through the company, got acquired and integrated, and now we are selling the business again. Okay? I think it's going to get better from here if this has been a long intro. So this is the product. We innovated around MRIs, and again, the product is an accessory to an MRI, so that whole piece that's in front of the MRI is what we do. The donut at the back is what GE, Siemens, Toshiba do. We have 2 flavors of products. We have tabletop products and stretcher products. You can see from this, very intense view on patient comfort, the attributes of our product. You can see all the space that's available so that you not only take a great image of a breast, but if you think you've found cancer, you have a lot of access for biopsy so you can find the cancer. It's a really excellent and amazing product right from Southern Ontario. The core of the technology is the fact that our coils move. So the innovation, the core innovation in our product was moving from a model where we call it a muffin tin or a fixed coil. So one would lie down with her breasts in a very fixed space. If you're a small-breasted woman, your breasts would be distant from the coils, which isn't as good for imaging. If you're a large-breasted woman, you wouldn't fit into the coil. We changed the paradigm with movements of the coil so that you get the best image, you can adapt to all physiologies, and you can optimize where you're taking the image. So it's truly breakthrough technology and a lot to be proud of. So, what I wanted to share with you was, given all of that, niche applications, fast-growing markets, lots happening in a small business, I just wanted to share 10 lessons that I think is important for us to think through, because it's not just about the technology innovation, it's also about what happens after. So number 10, this is not an academic discussion. You can read business cases about what it's like to live in a growth environment. I am telling you, you will never feel the kind of intensity that you feel when you grow in a company like this. You wake up and there's, you face every decision that you run through the day is, there's planning that needs to be doing, there's information for customers that needs to be had, there's what's the next investment, who needs what report, what team should we build, how should we organize ourselves. There's a million decisions that need to be made every day. You try to make it thoughtfully, but the barrage of information is unbelievable. So you're making, this is, again, it feels very intense because you're lacking sleep, you're working late, and you're giving everything you have to this enterprise. The innovation extends well beyond technology. So yes, every technology company, every innovation company, often it's the core technology that drives all the value, but it doesn't stop there. Innovation by definition is about building original structures, building original thoughts. And when you wake up and you're showing up into work and you don't have an infrastructure, right? You have to decide how you're going to provide service for your product. You're going to have to figure out how to make it in an economical way. You're going to have to figure out how to take care of your customers efficiently. You might have to make some money along the way. Where am I going to get that money? There's a lot of original constructs and original thinking that has to go into building the actual business. Customer expectations only increase. So you start your innovation business. You take care of 10 customers really well, right? You really, really well. They help you innovate. They help you make the next product. You live with them. So when people talk about unmet needs in a market, you truly understand it because you are working with customers. There's patients that are on a table and you're really solving problems. That's great. Now you sign a contract with GE, Siemens, Toshiba. How demanding are they as customers as they're trying to distribute globally? What do those contracts feel like when they're this thick? You go from high control, being able to control the customer experience in a way that is really remarkable, to suddenly feeling a whole different kind of pressure around what customers experience and what they expect from you. They get a whole lot more less forgiving when you're at the 1,000th customer than when you're at the 10th customer, because you're cool and young. Now you better deliver because I expect this thing to work. So it's a very different environment, and you really have to evolve as you go through that. Your choice of financing impacts everything that you do. So if you're budding entrepreneurs here, this is a really strategic decision. There's lots of financing options. I'm not sure if we have, government funding agencies or anything in the crowd, but there's a lot of really creative things that you do. Most entrepreneurs think about things like avoiding dilution of their investment, making sure their shareholders, aren't diluted as they go forward. In other words, I don't want to take on a lot more equity. I want to find other ways to finance the business. The problem with that is, do you want to have all the reporting burden associated with a government grant? Do you want to have a set of angel investors that aren't that sophisticated, but they aren't a ready access for additional capital? Or do you want a VC or some kind of private equity that's going to be way more demanding, but they can write big checks? All of that is really important as you go forward and as you think about how you're going to build your business. And you know, I think the lesson that you need to take away from that is there's no one right answer. There's no one right answer in any business. You got to find the way that makes sense according to your strategy. So your financing has to match your strategy as you go forward. Your market defines your opportunity. I painted what looks like, I think, a pretty rosy picture for a market. If you were to look at a market, you typically want one that's going to go like that. Lots of growth, lots of opportunity, gives you the chance to own the space. The problem is that because of that healthcare economics thing I talked about, breast MRI has actually, though the procedures have grown, the markets for coils has plateaued. So in the end, that defines the value of the company because you don't have a chance to grow beyond that market opportunity. It's a really important thing. Any of you that are going to start a business or going to take this forward, you need to think about that. The board really matters. Most of us will roll our eyes when we think about a board. But if you're in a startup, in a high-growth environment, you don't have a lot of corporate support, you don't have a lot of infrastructure, you need to find guidance and ways to gain experience beyond people that you can just hire in, because you can't afford to hire it all in, right? You're going fast, you want governors and people that can give you really good advice. And frankly, you also want a board that can help you offset shareholder interests, because typically your early-stage company is governed by your shareholders, and they are avoiding dilution, but they might not be thinking about the actual best interest of the business going forward, and you want somebody that can press on that. Fuel the fire. So fuel the fire obviously means passion, right? Because as much as you're lacking resource and infrastructure, what you have is mission. You have clarity of mission, and if you're going to lead this company, if you are going to be that entrepreneur that's going to take the business forward, you have to create passion in your people. That's what it's all about. But that's not the only fire. You also have to stoke the fire with cash, right? And just as an anecdote maybe from our Sentinel experience, you know, one of the early decisions that seemed pretty innocuous at the time, but has really come back to define the business is, should we continue to innovate the product sequentially, keep innovating each generation of product? And because of that, do we have to use a manufacturing methodology called cast urethane? Boring decision, right? I think we'll just use cast urethane. Or should we lock down this design in injection mold? Great thing about injection molding, as some of the people at the back table will tell you, we can cut 50% of our product costs if you injection mold versus doing this cast urethane. You know, at the time, we didn't have a lot of money. These injection molding tools cost millions of dollars, so we didn't invest. We didn't have the cash. We wanted to continue to improve. The reality is that put us so uncompetitive in the marketplace when healthcare economics is pushing prices down, our OEM customers are pushing prices down, we have nowhere to move on cost. And what it's meant is that we've had to totally go backwards, redo the product, now release it in injection molding. But because of all of that time lost and the lack of competitiveness in the business, that's one of the reasons that we're moving forward with a divestiture from Hologic. So the long-term interests of your business can be defined by what seem like really small decisions at the time. It's about the people. Every business is about people. Hiring and finding great people in a startup high-growth environment is really hard, because you got to lure them away from somewhere else that's more secure. You got to find people that are willing to take risks, and you need to have builders. So people that aren't just able to do a job, but people that can define a part of an organization. In my experience, it's very difficult. I think there's a subset of the population that can do this, and it's a really difficult hiring decision to find people that can truly build your business. Leadership demands are constant and intense. Because of that people thing, you need people that are very self-led, The leadership challenges are massive. Now, this is maybe a little self-serving because I came in at First Revenue, so I was not the innovator that developed the product. But a big part of what happened as we went forward